Elizabeth Báthory was a member of the Hungarian nobility. Her reputation as one of the cruelest women ever made history. In fact, she was listed as the female serial killer with the most victims in the Guinness Book of Records. How not, when she has killed and tortured 612 young girls in 25 years. Elizabeth Báthory Dix was a noble from the Kingdom of Hungary who lived between 1560 and 1614 AD. He was born into Transylvania's oldest and wealthiest family. Stefan Báthory, King of Poland, is a distant relative of Elizabeth. Elizabeth of Naudesty received a residence in Chait Castle as a wedding gift when she wed Ferenc Naudesty in 1975, when she was just 15 years old. Naudesty oversaw the Hungarian army's struggle against the Ottomans 3 years after their marriage when he was named chief commander. Elizabeth and Naudesty have been married for 10 years, yet despite this, they have never had children due to their limited time together. More so now that Naudesty is actively pursuing his career. Elizabeth gave birth to a daughter she called Anna somewhere around 1585. Ursula and Katerina, Elizabeth's children, were born throughout the course of the subsequent 9 years. She gave birth to Paul, her first son, in 1598. Naudesty passed away in 1600 at the age of 51. The exact reason of death, a illness or wound sustained in battle, is unknown. After Naudesty's passing, suspicions of Elizabeth committing a serial homicide started to spread. Elizabeth, who is 40 years old, worries that aging will make her less attractive, up until the day a maid accidentally pulled Elizabeth's hair while brushing it. Elizabeth gave the maid such a severe slap that she began to bleed. When he noticed the maid's blood on his hands, he assumed that it would provide youth and vitality to him. The brutality started. Elizabeth first murdered her castle's servants before moving on to murder local farmers' daughters. Under the pretense of teaching them manners and ethics, even some females were brought to her castle. Elizabeth also fabricated employment openings to entice rural females to her castle. Elizabeth would entice her victims, then torment them to death. He does it in a really harsh way. Elizabeth would mutilate, burn, beat, bite, and beat the victim until they starved to death. Then Elizabeth gave her slaves the order to gather their blood in a bucket and pour it into her swimming pool. Only virgin teenage girls' blood would be accepted by Elizabeth. He thinks that if he takes a bath in a virgin girl's blood, he won't age. Elizabeth will conduct a religious funeral procession to bury the victims in order to avoid raising any suspicions. But as more people were being killed, this did not last long. As there was no recognized cause of death for the girls who passed away, the pastor declined to do his obligations. He was under Elizabeth's threat to keep his habit a secret. As she ran out of excuses, Elizabeth stopped burying the victims' bodies and instead scattered them in various places, including a field, the river that flows behind the castle, a vegetable garden, and others. One of the victims ran away and informed the authorities of the events that took place at the castle. George Thurzo, the province's governor and the cousin of Elizabeth, was sent by King Mátyás of Hungary to look into the report. They visited the castle on December 30, 1610, and were horrified by what they witnessed. They discovered a girl who had passed away from blood loss in the main room. A sharp object was stabbed into the body of the one who was still alive. They also discovered several girls who were still alive in the dungeon, some of whom had endured multiple stabbings. They discovered roughly 50 dead girls while digging beneath the castle. Elizabeth declared herself to be innocent and declined to show up in court. Majordomo Johannes Udvari stated at the trial that around 37 unmarried girls had been murdered, while 6 of them had been personally hired to work in the castle. The majority of the girls were molested for weeks or perhaps months, the court said. They were suspended from the ceiling to create a blood fountain, chopped with scissors, and pierced with pins. A slave of Elizabeth's reported that roughly 40 females had been killed and subjected to torture. In reality, though, 612 women were murdered by Elizabeth, per the journal entries in the book. Hungary has all of the trial's documentation. They were all beheaded and burned for their roles in the crime. Elizabeth was the only royal who was prohibited from being put to death by law. Elizabeth was held in her castle for all time despite the fact that the court never found her guilty of any crime. Elizabeth was left alone in a space with no windows and only a tiny window for eating. At the age of 54, Elizabeth passed away in her own castle in 1614.